Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gavel struck the mahogany block with the finality of a headsman's axe, shattering the last remnant of my dignity. Sold to the warlord of the northern wastes for 5,000 gold taels. The roar of the crowd was a deafening wave of lust and malice, washing over the stage where I knelt, bound in translucent red silk that did nothing to hide the bruises on my soul. I tried to scream, to protest, to beg for death rather than this servitude, but my throat only produced a hideous, rasping wheeze. The silence was my prison. Just weeks ago, my voice had been the most celebrated treasure in the capital, capable of moving emperors to tears. Now, I was a mute novelty, a fallen celestial cast down into the mud. I looked up through the haze of incense and shame, locking eyes with the man who had just purchased my life. He did not smile. He sat upon a chair of iron and tiger pelt, his face a mask of scarred stoicism, radiating an aura of blood and winter. They called him the Demon General, a man who ate the hearts of his enemies. But as his dark eyes bore into mine, I didn't see hunger. I saw recognition. Act 1. The poison chalice memory is a cruel ghost. It haunted me even as I was dragged from the stage and thrown into the back of a black iron carriage. The wheels clattered against the cobblestones, a rhythm that synchronized with the throbbing pain in my damaged throat. My name is Lan Shichen. Once, I was the cherished ward of the Zhao family, the hidden genius behind the meteoric rise of young Master Zhao Feng. He was handsome, ambitious, and utterly devoid of talent. It was my voice behind the screens, my poetry on his scrolls, my strategies whispered in his ear that had elevated him to the position of the emperor's favorite advisor. I loved him. God, how I loved him. I mistook his possessiveness for protection and his greed for ambition we would share. The memory of the betrayal was vivid, playing on a loop behind my eyelids. The night he was appointed Grand Chancellor, he poured me a cup of wine. To us, Shichen, Zhao Feng had smiled, the candlelight dancing in his eyes I had thought were warm, but now realized were merely glittering with malice. You have given me the world. Now, I must ensure you never take it back. The wine tasted of plums and arsenic. I remembered the burning, the feeling of my vocal cords disintegrating like parchment in a fire. I remembered clutching at his robes, my mouth opening to scream, only for silence to vomit forth. He hadn't killed me. That would have been too simple, and perhaps too kind. Zhao Feng was a man who feared ghosts. He believed that if he killed a spirit singer, karma would strike him down. So he did something worse. He destroyed my identity. He told the world I had died of a sudden plague, while his guards dragged my paralyzed body to the Red Pavilion, the most notorious pleasure house in the Undercity. A mute whore can tell no secrets, Zhao Feng had whispered, caressing my cheek one last time. Your body is still beautiful, Shichen. Let it be your new currency. I have no use for it anymore. The carriage jolted, snapping me back to the present. The door swung open. We had not arrived at a dungeon, but at a sprawling, austere estate on the outskirts of the capital. The air here was sharp and cold. A rough hand grabbed my arm, pulling me out. It wasn't the guard. It was him. The warlord. General Wei Wuxian. He didn't drag me. He stabilized me. Up close, the scar running from his temple to his jaw was jagged, silver against his sun-darkened skin. He was terrifying, a mountain of muscle and dark armor, yet his grip was strangely careful. Can you walk? His voice was a deep rumble, vibrating through my chest. I nodded weakly, clutching the thin silk around my shivering frame. Good. Walk. I do not carry concubines, he said coldly, turning his back. Follow. I stumbled after him, my bare feet bleeding on the gravel. I expected to be led to a bedroom. I expected the same degradation I had narrowly avoided at the auction house. Instead, he led me to a library. It was vast, filled with military scrolls and the scent of old paper and weapon oil. Sit, he commanded, pointing to a cushion by a low table. I sat, curling into a ball. He poured a cup of tea, not wine, and pushed it toward me. Then, he sat opposite me, cleaning a heavy black dagger with a cloth. I know who you are, Lan Shichen, he said, not looking up from the blade. My breath hitched. I froze. I have ears in the palace. The general continued, his tone flat. I know Zhao Feng's poetry changed cadence 3 years ago. I know his strategic reports suddenly lacked the nuance they once held, despite his promotion. And I know that the death of his ward coincided with the appearance of a mute beauty in the Red Pavilion. He finally looked at me, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. I did not buy you for your body. I have no interest in warming my bed with a broken instrument. The insult stung, but relief washed over me so profound it nearly made me weep. I bought you because I hate Zhao Feng, Wei said, sheathing the dagger with a loud click. He is a leech sucking the empire dry. He maneuvered to have my supply lines cut in the north. He killed my brother with his political machinations. I want to destroy him. And you are the evidence of his corruption. He leaned forward, his massive presence engulfing me. But a mute witness is useless in court. And a broken man is useless in war. So, the question is, Lan Shichen, do you want to weep over your fate, or do you want to watch him burn? I stared at him. The fire in the hearth reflected in his eyes, igniting a spark in the cold, dead ash of my heart. I reached for the tea, dipped my finger in the liquid, and wrote a single character on the wooden table, sword. General Wei looked at the wet character, then at the fire in my eyes. For the first time, the corner of his lip quirked upward. Good answer. Act 2. The silent cultivation life in the general's manor was not the hell I feared, but it was a purgatory of rigorous discipline. Wei was a harsh master, but he was fair. He summoned the best physicians in the empire. They poked and prodded my throat, shaking their heads. The poison had fused the cords. The damage was permanent. I would never sing again. I would never speak again. When the head physician delivered the news, I shattered. I collapsed in the garden, clawing at the earth, a silent scream tearing through my chest until my ribs felt like they would snap. A shadow fell over me. Wei stood there, watching my grief. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't hug me. He threw a heavy object onto the grass beside me. It was a guqin, a zither. It was made of black wood, seemingly ancient, with strings that hummed with spiritual energy. Your voice is gone, Wei said, his voice devoid of pity. But your chi is not. The music of the vanquishing demons requires no throat, only intent. If you cannot speak your truth, play it. He left me there with the instrument. For the next 6 months, the manor filled with the sound of my struggle. At first, the notes were discordant, angry, screeching like dying birds. My fingers bled. My spirit wavered. But every night, Wei would sit in the courtyard, drinking wine, listening to my wretched practice without complaint. Slowly, the anger refined into focus. The discord became melody. I learned to channel my chi into the strings, creating sounds that could cut leaves from trees or soothe the savage guard dogs in the kennel. Our relationship shifted in the silence. One night, a storm raged, the kind of thunder that shakes the foundations of the earth. I found Wei in the main hall, clutching his head, his face pale and beaded with sweat. His chi was deviating. The curse of the battlefield, the ghosts of the men he had killed, were tearing at his mind. He was thrashing, destroying furniture. His guards were too terrified to approach. I walked in. I saw the pain in the eyes of the monster. I saw the boy beneath the armor who was terrified of the dark. I sat down, placed the guqin on my lap, and played. I didn't play a song of war. I played a lullaby I used to hum to Zhao Feng when he was sick, a song of forgiveness and peace I thought I had forgotten. The spiritual energy flowed from my fingers, visible waves of soft blue light washing over the general. His thrashing ceased. His breathing slowed. He slumped against a pillar, his eyes locking onto mine across the room. The madness faded, replaced by a vulnerability that stole the air from my lungs. When I finished, silence reclaimed the room, but it was no longer a heavy, oppressive thing. It was intimate. Wei crawled towards me, exhausted. He didn't touch me with lust. He took my hand, the one with calloused fingertips from the strings, and pressed his forehead against my knuckles. You speak loudly, Shichen, he whispered. In that moment, amidst the wreckage of the hall, I realized I wasn't just a weapon to him. And he wasn't just a savior to me. We were two broken halves of a sword, forged in the same fire. Act 3. The Banquet of Deceit, the Emperor's Winter Solstice Banquet, was the most lavish event of the decade. The great hall was draped in gold and crimson, the air thick with the scent of roasted meats and hypocrisy. Zhao Feng sat at the right hand of the emperor, basking in glory. He looked older, richer, his robes embroidered with phoenixes that he had no right to wear. He was laughing, toasting to his own genius, recounting a poem he claimed to have written just that morning. I stood in the shadows of the entrance, wearing a mask of silver porcelain that covered the upper half of my face. I wore robes of midnight blue, the color of the general's house. Wei stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, a touch that grounded me, a silent promise. I am here. General Wei. The emperor's voice boomed. You grace us with your presence. And you bring a musician? The hall went quiet. Zhao Feng's eyes narrowed as he looked at us. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was dead. Your Majesty, Wei bowed, his voice projecting effortless power. I bring a rare talent from the north. A mute zither player whose melodies are said to reveal the soul. A mute. Zhao Feng scoffed, sipping his wine. How novel. Does he dance as well? Or is he merely a prop for your brooding aesthetic, General? The court tittered nervously. Wei smiled, a shark baring its teeth. Let us hear the music before we judge the man. Play. I stepped forward. The floor was cold beneath my boots. I sat before the emperor, placing the black guqin on the stand. I closed my eyes. Asterisk focus. Rage. Justice. Asterisk I struck the first chord. It wasn't a gentle sound. It was a thunderclap. The spiritual energy rippled outward, extinguishing half the candles in the hall. The court gasped. I began to play the serpent in the garden. It was a complex, difficult piece, but I wove a second layer into it, a narrative told through the pitch and vibration of the strings. The music mimicked the cadence of Zhao Feng's voice. It mimicked the sound of wine being poured. It mimicked the choking sounds of a man being silenced. The magic of the spirit sound was that it evoked memories in the listener. The emperor frowned, rubbing his temple. This song, it sounds like. I increased the tempo. The music became aggressive, accusing. I looked directly at Zhao Feng. His face had gone pale. The cup in his hand trembled. He recognized the style. He recognized the technique. It was the specific finger-picking method I had used to teach him the basics of rhythm, the one only he and I knew. I poured my qi into the strings, projecting my memory directly into the hall. For a fleeting second, the illusion of a poisoned chalice appeared in the air, ghostly and green. Stop! Zhao Feng shrieked, standing up and knocking over his table. Stop this sorcery. Guards! Arrest this assassin. The music cut off abruptly. The silence was louder than the song. Assassin. Wei stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of his sword. He has played only music, Chancellor. What are you afraid the song will say? He is using dark arts. Zhao Feng sputtered, sweat dripping down his face. He is trying to bewitch the emperor. I stood up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I reached up and untied the silk ribbons of my mask. The porcelain fell to the floor, shattering. I looked at Zhao Feng. The color drained from his face completely. He looked as if he had seen a corpse walk out of a grave. Shichen, he whispered, the name slipping out before he could stop it. The emperor looked between us. You know this man, Zhao Feng? You said your ward died of the plague. I. Zhao Feng stammered. It is a trick. A demon wearing a dead man's face. Wei Wuxian's voice cut through the panic like a blade. Strange. If he died of the plague, why does the registry of the Red Pavilion show a bill of sale signed by your personal steward, dated the very night of his death? Wei pulled a scroll from his sleeve and tossed it to the emperor's eunuch. The emperor unrolled it. The silence in the hall was suffocating. Zhao Feng, the emperor said, his voice low and dangerous. Explain. Your Majesty, he cannot speak, Your Majesty. Wei interrupted, his voice rising to a roar. Because this man, the genius you admire, poisoned him to steal his talents. Every poem, every strategy, every success you attributed to Zhao Feng belonged to Lin Shichen. Lies, Zhao Feng screamed, drawing a dagger from his sleeve, a desperate, foolish move born of total collapse. He lunged not at Wei, but at me, the source of his ruin. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. There was a flash of silver. Wei Wuxian was there. He didn't draw his sword. He caught Zhao Feng's wrist in midair. The crack of bone breaking echoed through the hall. Zhao screamed, dropping the dagger. Wei kicked him in the chest, sending him flying backward to crash at the foot of the emperor's throne. You sought to silence him, Wei growled, standing over the broken chancellor. But you forgot one thing, Zhao. A voice is not just sound. It is spirit. And you cannot kill what you do not understand. Act 4. The sunrise. The purge was swift. The emperor, humiliated by the deception, stripped the Zhao family of all rank. Zhao Feng was exiled to the frozen north, sentenced to labor in the mines until his debt to the empire was paid. I watched him leave the city from the ramparts of the general's manor. He looked small, pathetic, stripped of the borrowed glory he had worn like a costume. I felt empty. The vengeance I had craved for so long was achieved, but it didn't magically heal my throat. It didn't erase the memory of the brothel. A warm cloak settled over my shoulders. I turned. Wei was there. He wasn't wearing his armor today. He wore simple robes of gray silk. He looked tired, but his eyes were gentle. It is over, he said softly. I looked at him, then out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to bleed into the sky. I raised my hands and signed, a language he had learned over the long winter months. Is it? The past is dead, Wei replied. You are free, Shichen. You can go anywhere. The emperor has offered you a pension. You can travel. You can teach. I looked at his hands. Hands that had killed for me, hands that had held me when I woke up screaming from nightmares of the auction block. I shook my head. I stepped closer to him. I reached out and traced the scar on his face. I have no voice, I signed. I will listen to your silence, he replied instantly. I am broken, so am I. He captured my hand, pressing a kiss to the palm. Stay? Not as a servant. Not as a guest. Stay as my partner. Rule the north with me. Be the music in my silent halls. The morning sun crested the mountains, bathing us in gold. For the first time since the poison burned my throat, I felt a sensation I thought I had lost forever. I felt a song rising in my chest. It had no words, and it would never be heard by the world, but it was there. I smiled, a true, genuine smile, and nodded. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing General Wei take control to protect his love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a lover who betrayed you for ambition, or is some damage unforgivable? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.